What gets you up in the morning? Is there one thing you've been passionate about for most of your life? For me, that one thing is learning. Nothing makes me happier than learning new things. I feel like that's the case with most book lovers. We all like to have our minds stretched. Today, I'm going to show you some books in my collection that I bought to help me learn. Hi, I'm Linda Maxey, the author of Library Lens' curated collection of superlative nonfiction and Library Lens biographies, autobiographies, and memoirs. As I said in the introduction, my biggest passion in life is learning. I'm going to share 6 books with you from my collection that talk about learning in one way or another. These aren't the only books that I have that explain how to do things or learn things, but they are books that explain how to expand your learning on your own terms. I think I would have taken college classes into old age, but I couldn't because money. I'm going to talk about these books from the most general to the most specific. The first is one of my favorite books. I've read well over 1,000 books in my life, and this is one of my all-time favorites. The book is The Art of Learning, A Journey in the Pursuit of Excellence by Josh Waitzken. If you've ever seen the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, which was based on Josh's childhood and written by his father, Fred, then you know that Josh was a chess prodigy from childhood who won his first national chess championship at age 9. After spending 10 years dominating in chess, he decided to pivot to a new interest, the martial art Tai Chi Chuan, which he became a world champion. Josh himself realized that he was not great at chess or Tai Chi. What he was great at was learning. So yes, learning can absolutely be a superpower that makes your life more fascinating and opens all sorts of doors for you. He describes the everyday routines that he uses to learn in this book. I loved it when I first read it over 10 years ago, and looking back over it makes me want to read it again. The next book is The Shelf, Adventures in Extreme Reading by Phyllis Rose. I think I've discussed this book in a video before, but I'm going to talk about it again briefly. I loved that book. It was like reading about a good friend doing something that I would love to do myself. Rose is a member of the New York Society Library. And while the reading room, exhibitions, and some other programs are open to the public, checking out materials from the library requires a paid membership. It's the oldest library in New York City. It sounds like an awesome place. As an experiment, Rose decided to read an entire shelf of books from the library's fiction collection, from LEQ to LES. Many of the authors and novels she finds there are new to her. She describes the works and her reactions to them, but she also digs out all the knowledge she can find about authors and the circumstances that affected the book in question. If the author was alive and available, she tracked them down and talked to them. And she ties what she learns into society as well. I think I love this book so much because I've always considered books a great conversation between all humans who write and read, and I got the idea of the great conversation from How to Read a Book. If you're interested in that book, I'm covering it a little bit at a time, and you can find it in the playlist below. Reading is a big way we communicate and understand one another, and I think Rose's experiment was great good fun. I've included it with my favorite books on learning because just jumping into random fiction turned out to be a great way for Rose to learn the unexpected. And just think of what a wonderful thing that would be for any courageous reader to try. The next book on my list is The Well-Educated Mind, A Guide to the Classical Education You Never Had by Susan Wise Bauer. Bauer, at the time of the book's publication, was a professor of American literature at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia, which is a fine institution that was attended by some of my favorite people. At present, she owns Well-Trained Mind Learning Services and Educational Consultancy, and she runs the Well-Trained Mind Press, which is an imprint of W.W. Norton, my favorite publisher. The imprint focuses on educational materials for parents, such as rethinking school, how to take charge of your child's education. They provide programs to teach grammar, writing, and history from elementary through high school, and they also offer college courses. On to the book. I haven't completed this book. I bought it years ago and will be the first to admit that I'm not a disciplined person. Her book is not for parents who want to homeschool their children. It's for an adult who's never had a classical education. And that would be most of us, I think. In the first chapter, she says, No matter how incomplete your education, you can learn to read intelligently, think about your reading, and talk to a friend about what you've discovered. I like the way she thinks. She gives instructions on when and how to read, and this is where it went off the rails for me. I am terrible at following instructions. I tried to do what she said, I just couldn't stick with the program. I don't think this is a fault with her method. I think it works for anybody who has a normal brain, but for somebody like me, it just didn't work. It required too much discipline to follow, but I may return to it one day. The book is based on Western civilization's knowledge. There's a lot to be said about taking a more global approach, but it's good to have a firm grasp of the collected knowledge of your own culture too, and that's where this book would come in for me. If you've been watching my videos on how to read a book, you've seen me moaning about how difficult the books Adler and Van Doren discuss are. Here's what she has to say about that. The serious reader is not attempting to assimilate a huge quantity of information as quickly as possible, but to understand a few elusive and many-sided ideas. I think that's another place I go off the rails. I don't tend to stick with one thing very well and go into it deeply. I tend to be like a bee. I just float around and collect ideas, and that's not necessarily the best way to learn. As for teaching you to read serious books, she starts off with novels. I worked my way about halfway through the novel section before I got distracted and stopped. Reading history through the novels, she calls it. I stopped with Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, but if I ever make it through the novels in that chapter, I'll go on to read the autobiographies, memoirs, books of history and politics, and plays and poems that she goes on to recommend later. This is a book for serious readers, and if you're willing to work for a classical education and that sounds exciting to you, I recommend this book. The next book is on how to research in today's world. The book is Find It Fast, Extracting Expert Information from Social Media Networks, Big Data, Tweets, and More. The 6th edition of this book was updated and is available as an ebook by Robert Berkman, the author. Of course, this information changes all the time, but I've read through this book twice, and I've concentrated on specific advice he gives, and I followed it with good results. I hope he comes out with a new edition soon. Berkman is a professor, author, and editor who uses the methods he teaches in his own professional life. He spends a lot of his time researching changes in the media and information environment and analyzing how those changes affect the larger world. The methods he recommends are effective and easy to understand. I thought this was a fascinating read on its own, but I am a librarian. But I think it would help anyone who wants to find out how to find good information, find it reliably and quickly. The next book is a wonder to me. You're about to find out just how intensely nerdy I can be. This book is How to Take Smart Notes, One Simple Technique to Boost Writing, Learning, and Thinking for Students, Academics, and Nonfiction Book Writers by Sonke Ahrens. And I may not be pronouncing that name correctly. My 11th grade English teacher, Mrs. Williams, taught me a simple form of this method to use for researching and writing papers. God bless her. It got me through college and graduate school, and I've been grateful to her ever since. This book explains how the same method can be used to organize everything you ever learn into a repository for everything you've ever researched that can be organized and cross-referenced into an effective external brain to keep track of all the research you've ever done. Whew. How awesome is that? I believe Robert Greene and Ryan Holiday use this method, and I'm sure many others do as well. Let me just read you part of the back cover. Instead of wasting your time searching for notes, quotes, or references, you can focus on what really counts: thinking, understanding, and developing new ideas in writing. And it does not matter if you prefer taking notes with a pen or paper or on a computer, be it Windows, Macs, or Linux, you can start right away. And that's not an exaggeration. It really is great. Another name for this method is Zettlekasten. You can look it up. It's all over YouTube. Here are a few of the pages I've marked up. Even if you don't want to write in a book, if you're an information junkie or just truly like to learn, this is a fun system to use. And the longer you use it, the more useful it grows. And the beauty of it is, yours will be completely different from anyone else's. Just like people, these creations are unique. I was using this in high school and college before personal computers were a thing. I used note cards for this system and it worked great. Now there are all sorts of note-taking apps that you can use instead if you would rather. or don't. If analog appeals to you, it works just fine. I found this book a joy to read. And the final book, I'm only going to mention briefly because I haven't read this yet. Practicing History, Selected Essays by Barbara Tuchman. Yes, that's the same Barbara Tuchman who wrote A Distant Mirror, The March of Folly, and Stilwell and the American Experience in China. Tuchman was a well-respected, self-educated historian in the 20th century. She did have a Bachelor of Arts degree from Radcliffe College and afterwards became a research assistant for the Institute of Pacific Relations. She worked for the nation as a foreign correspondent before marrying in 1940 and having her children. In this book, she writes about her experiences researching and writing history and what it all means and why it matters. As I've said, I've not read this book yet, but I thought I would mention it here in case there are any budding historians watching. So that wraps it up for today. How about you? Do you have any books on learning to recommend? I would love to hear about them if you do. And until next time, happy reading.